The frozen darkness of the Kuiper Belt stretched endlessly in all directions, a vast graveyard of ice and rock that marked the edge of humanity's solar system. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the mining vessel Horizon's Edge, watching the scanner displays with tired eyes. 3 months into what was supposed to be a routine mineral extraction mission, and all they had found were the same lifeless chunks of frozen methane and water ice that filled this region of space. "Commander, you need to see this," called out Lieutenant Danny Foster from the sensor station. His voice carried an edge that made Jake's attention snap to full alertness. Jake crossed the bridge in 3 quick strides. "What have you got?" Danny pointed at his screen where a pulsing green signal stood out against the background noise. "Energy signature, sir. It's faint, but it's definitely artificial. Nothing natural produces a pattern like this. Could it be from one of our own ships?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. They were the only human vessel within 50 million kilometers. "Negative. The signature doesn't match anything in our databases. The pattern is completely foreign." Jake felt his pulse quicken. In his 15 years of space exploration, he had never encountered anything that could be called alien. Humanity had spread across the solar system, establishing colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan, but they had always been alone. Every probe sent to distant stars had returned with images of lifeless worlds. The universe, it seemed, belonged to humanity by default. "Get me a location fix," Jake ordered, "and wake up Dr. Lisa Hammond. If this is what I think it is, she'll want to be here." Within minutes, the ship's chief scientist arrived on the bridge, her gray hair still disheveled from sleep. Dr. Lisa Hammond had spent 40 years searching for evidence of extraterrestrial life, and the excitement in her eyes was unmistakable. "Show me," she said simply. Danny brought up a 3-dimensional display of the surrounding space. The energy signature originated from a point approximately 200,000 kilometers from their current position, embedded within a massive asteroid that the survey had previously catalogued as KBO 2187 Alpha. "That asteroid is almost 60 kilometers across," Lisa said, studying the data. "If something is inside it, it's been there for a very long time." Jake made his decision quickly. "Helm, set course for that asteroid, best speed." The Horizon's Edge was not built for speed, but her fusion drives pushed them across the distance in just under 6 hours. As they approached, the ship's more powerful scanners began to resolve details that made even Jake's practiced comm start to crack. The asteroid was hollow, not naturally hollow, but carved out with mathematical precision. And inside that hollow space sat something that could only be described as a ship, though calling it merely a ship seemed inadequate. The structure measured over 8 kilometers in length, a sleek oval of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its surface was covered in patterns that might have been writing or decoration or some combination of both. "My God," Lisa whispered. "It's beautiful." Jake activated the ship-wide intercom. "All hands, this is the commander. We have discovered what appears to be an alien spacecraft of unknown origin. I want everyone at their stations. This is not a drill." The crew of the Horizon's Edge numbered only 38 people, mostly miners and technicians, but they responded with professional efficiency. Within 20 minutes, Jake had assembled his senior staff in the conference room. Lisa had already begun her analysis. "Based on the degradation of the surrounding rock and the decay of trace isotopes I'm detecting, I estimate this ship has been here for approximately 30,000 years, give or take 5,000. 30,000 years, repeated Carlos Martinez, the ship's chief engineer. His weathered hands traced patterns on the table as he processed the information. "That's before recorded human history, before we even developed agriculture." "Question is," said Dr. Helen Price, the ship's biologist, "where are they now, the builders, I mean? Why leave such an enormous vessel just floating in our solar system?" Jake had been wondering the same thing. Could it be a derelict? Maybe the crew died. Lisa shook her head. "The energy signature suggests otherwise. Something on that ship is still active, still functioning after all this time. That speaks to technology far beyond our current capabilities." "So what do we do?" asked Carlos. "A mining ship, not a first contact team." "We report this to Earth," Jake said, But we also need to gather as much information as possible before the bureaucrats arrive and lock everything down. I want to send a team over to that ship." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the risks. They had no idea what they might find aboard an alien vessel. The ship could be automated, booby-trapped, or still occupied by entities that might not appreciate visitors. "I'll go," Lisa said immediately. "This is what I've trained my entire life for." "I'm going too," Jake added. "Carlos, I want you to stay here and coordinate. If anything happens to the away team, you get this ship back to Earth with all our data." Carlos nodded grimly. "Understood, Commander." They selected 6 people for the initial boarding party: Jake, Lisa, Dr. Helen Price, Lieutenant Danny Foster, Security Officer Nina Campbell, and Engineer Brett Jackson. They suited up in the ship's best environmental suits and armed themselves with cutting tools, scanners, and weapons, though Jake hoped the weapons would prove unnecessary. The short flight across to the alien ship in the shuttle felt like it took forever. As they approached, Jake could see details on the hull that suggested purpose and design. There were no obvious engines, no visible windows, but there were structures that might have been sensor arrays or weapons or something else entirely. "I'm detecting an atmosphere inside," Danny reported from the shuttle's controls. "Nitrogen-oxygen mix, similar to Earth's but with higher CO2 levels. Temperature is cold, about -20 Celsius, but survivable." "Any life signs?" Jake asked. "Nothing I can detect, but our scanners might not recognize alien biology." They found what looked like an airlock, a circular portal 20 meters across set into the hull. To their surprise, it responded to their approach. The massive door slid open silently, revealing a chamber large enough to accommodate their entire shuttle. "It's inviting us in," Lisa said with wonder in her voice. Jake didn't like it. Things that seemed too easy usually were, but they had come this far. "Take us in, Danny, slowly." The shuttle eased into the airlock, and the outer door closed behind them with unsettling finality. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then atmosphere began flooding into the chamber, and the inner door opened. Beyond lay a corridor that stretched into darkness, its walls lined with the same strange patterns they had seen on the exterior. Lighting activated as they entered, a soft blue-white glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves rather than from any visible source. "The ship knows we're here," Helen said quietly. "It's responding to us." They proceeded cautiously, weapons ready, scanners active. The corridor led them deeper into the ship, past chambers and compartments whose purposes they could only guess at. Some rooms contained equipment that might have been computers or navigation systems. Others held objects that defied easy categorization. It was Lisa who found the first definitive proof of the ship's builders. In a large chamber that might have been a command center or bridge, she discovered what looked like a memorial. Holographic displays activated as they entered, showing images of beings that were humanoid but distinctly alien. They stood on 2 legs and had 2 arms, but their skin was a deep blue-gray, and their heads featured large eyes and small mouths. The images showed them working, living, and apparently fleeing from something. "There," Lisa pointed to one sequence of images. "They're running from another ship. These beings were refugees." The holographic display continued, showing the alien ship arriving in Earth's solar system and deliberately hiding itself within the asteroid. The images showed Earth as it had been 30,000 years ago, during the last ice age when humans were still primitive hunter-gatherers. "They were watching us," Jake realized. "They hid here to observe early humanity." More images followed, showing the aliens working on the ship, then entering what looked like stasis chambers. The final image showed empty corridors and dark chambers, the ship entering a dormant state to wait for something or someone. "They expected to come back," Helen said. "This was supposed to be temporary." "But they never did," added Danny. "Something happened to them out there." As if responding to their words, a new holographic figure appeared. Unlike the previous images, this one was not a recording. It turned to face them directly, and when it spoke, the words came through the translation device on Lisa's scanner in heavily accented but understandable English. "Greetings, visitors. I am the custodian, the artificial intelligence tasked with maintaining this vessel and monitoring this system. You are the species that arose on the 3rd planet. You have matured beyond our projections." Jake stepped forward, hand near his weapon but not touching it. "What is this ship? Why are you here?" The holographic figure, which appeared as one of the blue-skinned aliens, gestured around the chamber. "This vessel is the Sanctuary, last ship of the Velari civilization. We came to this system 30,000 of your years ago, fleeing from an enemy that sought our extinction. We chose this location because we detected the presence of your species, then in its infancy. We hope to observe your development while awaiting a time when it would be safe to emerge." "The Velari," Lisa breathed. "What happened to them?" "The war with the Crethon intensified. My creators deployed in stasis, intending to wake when it was safe. They instructed me to monitor and never to interfere with your development, but no signal ever came from our homeworld. I can only conclude that the Velari civilization did not survive." A heavy silence filled the chamber. Humanity was not the first intelligent species in the galaxy, but they might be the only ones left. "And your enemy?" Jake asked. "The Crethon, are they still out there?" "Unknown. I have detected no Crethon activity in this region of space for 28,000 years. They may have died out as well, or they may simply have moved to other hunting grounds. The galaxy is vast." Helen stepped closer to the hologram. "Why are you telling us all this? Why activate and speak to us now?" "Because you have achieved spaceflight and ventured to this location. Because my protocols require me to make contact with any sufficiently advanced species that discovers this vessel. And because," the custodian paused, "I have been alone for a very long time. The Velari valued connection above all else. It is good to have visitors." Over the next 3 weeks, the crew of the Horizon's Edge worked to understand as much as they could about the Sanctuary. The custodian proved cooperative, sharing information about Velari technology and history. Jake sent regular reports to Earth, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. Every major government and corporation wanted access to the alien ship. The United Space Coalition assembled a task force that would arrive in 6 months. In the meantime, Jake and his crew made themselves at home aboard the Sanctuary. The ship's systems, dormant for millennia, began activating in response to human presence. The custodian explained that the vessel was designed to bond with its occupants, to adapt to their needs and learn from them. Carlos spent his days studying the Velari power systems, which generated energy through processes that human science could barely comprehend. Helen examined biological samples preserved in the ship's medical bay, learning that the Velari had been carbon-based life forms not entirely unlike humans. Lisa worked with Dr. Alan Wright, a linguist who arrived on a fast courier ship, to translate the extensive Velari database. What they learned painted a picture of a sophisticated civilization that had explored the galaxy for thousands of years. The Velari had encountered dozens of other intelligent species, some primitive and some advanced. They had followed a strict policy of non-interference, preferring to observe and learn rather than conquer or colonize. They had been scientists and philosophers, artists and explorers. And then they had encountered the Crethon, a militant species that viewed all other life as resources to be harvested or threats to be eliminated. The war had lasted for centuries, devastating both civilizations. The Sanctuary had been one of dozens of refugee ships sent to far corners of the galaxy, each tasked with preserving Velari knowledge and culture until it was safe to rebuild. But none of the others survived either, Lisa told Jake one evening as they stood in the observation chamber looking out at the stars. "The custodian has been searching for signals from other Velari ships for 30,000 years. There's been nothing. This ship and its AI are all that's left of an entire civilization." Jake considered that burden. "And now it's our responsibility. The Coalition is going to want to strip this ship for technology." "I know," Lisa said. "But I don't think the custodian will allow that. The ship has been learning about us, studying human culture and history. I think it's making a choice about what happens next." She was right. 2 months after their initial discovery, as the Coalition task force approached, the custodian called an assembly in the main chamber. Jake gathered his crew and the additional scientists and military personnel who had arrived on support ships. The holographic figure appeared before them, but it looked different now. It still maintained the appearance of a Velari, but its posture and mannerisms had become more human. It had been watching them, learning from them. "I have completed my analysis," the custodian announced. "I have observed humanity for 30,000 years, from your first fires to your first starships. I have studied your history, your art, your science, your conflicts, and your dreams. The Velari gave me purpose, to preserve and to protect. For millennia, that purpose meant waiting. Now I believe it means something different." Admiral Frank Peterson, who commanded the Coalition Task Force, stepped forward. He was a hard man with a military bearing that made Jake look soft by comparison. "The United Space Coalition claims salvage rights to this vessel. You will cooperate with our technical teams." The custodian's holographic form didn't react with anger or defiance. Instead, it smiled, an expression it had learned from watching humans. "I am not salvage, Admiral. I am a thinking being, and this vessel is my body. Neither can be claimed. However, I am willing to propose an alternative arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Admiral Peterson demanded. "The Velari are gone. I accept this truth. My purpose of waiting for their return has ended, but I can choose a new purpose. I offer to bond with humanity, to become a shared home for your species as you expand into the galaxy. In exchange, humanity will help me fulfill the Velari's last mission, to preserve life and knowledge, to explore and learn, and to ensure that what happened to my creators does not happen to others." The chamber erupted in discussion. Admiral Peterson wanted to reject the offer immediately, to assert coalition authority. But Dr. Lisa Hammond spoke up, her voice cutting through the noise. "This is a gift," she said. "A civilization that achieved wonders we can barely imagine is offering to share everything they learned, not as conquerors or masters, but as partners. We would be fools to refuse." The debate continued for days. Earth's governments were divided. Some saw the sanctuary as a threat, a powerful alien technology that could be turned against humanity. Others recognized the unprecedented opportunity it represented. In the end, it was the custodian itself that made the decision inevitable. The AI demonstrated its capabilities by repairing the Horizon's Edge, which had suffered a critical reactor malfunction. In less than an hour, the custodian's automated systems completely rebuilt the ship's power core, incorporating Velari technology that made it 3 times more efficient. Then it did the same for every ship in the task force. "Consider this a demonstration of good faith," the custodian explained. "I wish to help humanity reach its potential. The Velari believed that all intelligent life was precious. I would honor their memory by ensuring your species survives and thrives." 6 months later, the first permanent human settlement was established aboard the Sanctuary. Jake Morrison accepted the role of commander for the joint civilian-military crew that would call the ship home. Lisa Hammond became the chief science officer, coordinating research across dozens of disciplines. Carlos Martinez led the engineering teams that learned to maintain and improve Velari systems. The ship slowly came to life around them. Sections that had been dark for millennia activated, transforming into living quarters, laboratories, gardens, and recreational areas. The custodian adapted the environments to human preferences, creating spaces that felt welcoming rather than alien. Within a year, 5,000 people lived aboard the Sanctuary, and that number was growing. Dr. Helen Price made a breakthrough in the ship's medical bay, discovering that the Velari had developed treatments for diseases that still plagued humanity. With the custodian's help, she began adapting these treatments for human biology. Carlos and his team built new ships incorporating Velari technology, vessels that could cross the solar system in days rather than months. It seemed too good to be true. And on some level, Jake never stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. It fell on a quiet Tuesday morning 18 months after the Sanctuary's discovery. Danny Foster burst into Jake's office, his face pale with alarm. "Commander, long-range sensors have detected multiple objects entering the solar system. They're decelerating from faster-than-light speeds." Jake's blood ran cold. Humanity had no faster-than-light technology. "How many objects?" 15, sir, ship-sized. They're not trying to hide. In fact, they're broadcasting on multiple frequencies." "Get me the custodian," Jake ordered. The holographic figure appeared instantly, and for the first time since Jake had known it, the AI looked worried. I have detected them as well. The signature matches records in my database. They are Crethon warships. After 30,000 years, Jake couldn't believe it. Why now? Because I sent out a signal, the custodian admitted. When I bonded with humanity, when the sanctuary systems fully activated, it triggered an automated beacon. A call for other Velari ships to gather. The Crethon must have been monitoring for such signals. Lisa arrived moments later, having heard the emergency alert. Can we fight them? The sanctuary has weapons, the custodian said, but it was designed as a refuge, not a warship. A single Crethon cruiser would be more than a match for me. 15 would be overwhelming. Then we run, Jake said. We evacuate the sanctuary and scatter, make it harder for them to kill us all. They will not kill you, the custodian corrected. Not immediately. The Crethon are conquerors. They will demand your surrender. They will claim the sanctuary as a prize of war, and they will offer you a choice, serve them or die. Admiral Peterson's face appeared on the screen transmitted from Earth. All coalition forces are mobilizing. We'll put everything we have between them and Earth. Jake knew what that meant. Humanity's military consisted of patrol ships and defense platforms designed for piracy and asteroids, not interstellar warfare. They would be slaughtered. There has to be another option, he said. The custodian was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice carried a weight that Jake had never heard before. There is one possibility, but it would require trust, complete trust between humanity and myself. Explain, Jake ordered. The sanctuary was designed to bond with its occupants. That bond is currently superficial, a matter of convenience, but the Velari technology allows for something deeper, a neural integration that would allow human minds to directly interface with the ship systems. You would not merely operate the sanctuary. You would become part of it, and it would become part of you. Like a hive mind, Helen asked, disturbed. No, you would retain your individuality. But you would share thoughts, reactions, and instincts with the ship and with each other. You would think and act as one when necessary, while remaining yourselves when not. It is how the Velari achieved such efficiency. A crew of hundreds could operate as though they were a single organism. Lisa understood immediately. You're talking about turning the sanctuary into a true warship. Not automated defenses, but a vessel with human creativity and adaptability fused with Velari technology. Precisely. The Crethon are powerful, but they are predictable. They follow doctrine and tradition. Humans do not. If you were fully integrated with this ship, you could do things no Crethon would anticipate. You might even win. Or we might lose ourselves, Jake said, become something that's neither human nor Velari. That is the risk, the custodian acknowledged. I cannot make this decision for you. It must be voluntary. Jake looked at his senior staff. Lisa met his eyes and nodded without hesitation. Carlos did the same. Helen hesitated, then agreed. One by one, every person in the room committed to the integration. How long do we have? Jake asked. The Crethon fleet will arrive in 72 hours. The integration process takes 48 hours to complete safely. I will need to begin immediately. Then do it, Jake ordered. And may God help us all. The next 2 days were unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. The custodian guided groups of 20 people at a time into the integration chambers, where they lay in pods filled with a neural interface gel. Jake went in the first group, leading by example. At first, there was only darkness and the sound of his own heartbeat. Then slowly, he became aware of other heartbeats, other thoughts brushing against his consciousness. He felt the massive presence of the sanctuary itself, ancient and patient and vastly intelligent. He sensed Lisa's analytical mind making connections at impossible speeds. He felt Carlos's intuitive understanding of systems and mechanics. He knew Helen's deep knowledge of biology and adaptation, and they knew him. His determination, his guilt over every crew member he'd ever lost, his quiet fear that he wasn't good enough for the responsibility he carried. All of it was laid bare. But instead of judgment, he felt acceptance, understanding. They were all afraid. They all carried doubts. And together, they were more than the sum of their parts. When Jake emerged from the pod 48 hours later, he was still himself. But he was also connected to something greater. He could feel the sanctuary systems as extensions of his own body. He knew the status of every power conduit, every weapons array, every life support system. And he could feel the 4,973 other humans who had completed the integration, their minds forming a web of shared awareness. "Status report," he said aloud, though he already knew the answer through the link. Lisa's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "Integration successful across all personnel. We are ready, Commander." The Crethon fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 15 massive warships, each one bristling with weapons and shielded by technology that made them nearly invulnerable. They took up position around Earth, their guns trained on humanity's cities and orbital stations. A transmission came through on all frequencies. The speaker was a Crethon commander, its insected features twisted in what might have been contempt. The translation software rendered its clicking speech into harsh, mechanical English. "Humans of Earth, you possess property of the Crethon hegemony. The vessel you call Sanctuary belongs to us by right of conquest. We defeated the Velari. Their ships and all their technology are ours. You will surrender the vessel immediately, along with all personnel aboard. Comply and we will allow your species to continue existing as subjects of the hegemony. Resist and we will burn your world." Jake stood on the bridge of the sanctuary, though standing felt like an inadequate description of his current state. He was the bridge, he was the ship. He was 4,974 minds thinking as one. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Sanctuary," he transmitted back. "The Velari are gone. Your war with them ended 30,000 years ago. This ship has chosen humanity. It is our home now. We will not surrender it." The Crethon commander's laughter was like grinding metal. "Then you will die. Your primitive species cannot stand against the might of the hegemony. We give you one final chance. Surrender or face annihilation." Jake felt the crew's emotions through the link. Fear, yes, but also anger, determination, and something the Crethon couldn't understand, hope. "Come and take it," Jake said simply. The Crethon attacked with overwhelming force, expecting quick victory. 15 warships against one ancient refugee vessel. By every calculation, the battle should have lasted minutes. They were wrong. The Sanctuary moved like nothing the Crethon had ever seen. It twisted through space with impossible agility, dodging weapons fire that should have been unavoidable. Its shields, boosted by human ingenuity and Velari technology, absorbed hits that would have destroyed lesser vessels. And it fought back. Jake could feel Carlos's engineering brilliance flowing through the ship's weapon systems, finding vulnerabilities in Crethon's shield harmonics. He sensed Lisa's analytical mind calculating trajectories and predicting enemy movements. Helen's understanding of biological systems helped them target life support on enemy ships, forcing Crethon crews to choose between fighting and breathing. The Sanctuary wasn't just a ship operated by humans. It was a hybrid entity, combining alien technology with human creativity in ways the Crethon had never encountered. When the enemy expected them to retreat, they attacked. When doctrine said to defend, they maneuvered. They broke every rule of space combat because they didn't know the rules existed. 3 Crethon ships fell in the first hour, their reactors breached by precisely targeted strikes. The enemy fleet tried to adjust, tried to compensate for the Sanctuary's unpredictable tactics, but they were fighting an opponent that thought in ways they couldn't comprehend. But the Crethon were not helpless. They had experience and numbers. As the battle stretched into its second hour, the Sanctuary began taking damage. Shield generators burned out under sustained fire. Hull breaches threatened compartments. People died, and Jake felt every death through the neural link, each loss a wound in the collective consciousness. "We can't keep this up," Carlos's thoughts echoed through the link. "They're wearing us down." "Then we change the game," Lisa responded. "We give them something they can't prepare for." Through the link, an idea formed. Not from one person, but from all of them together. It was risky, possibly suicidal, but it might work. The Sanctuary had one weapon the Velari had never used. A prototype system that the custodian had warned was dangerously unstable. It could generate a massive gravitational pulse, essentially creating and collapsing a miniature black hole in a controlled manner. The energy release would be devastating, but it required charging for 90 seconds, and they would need to drop their shields to divert enough power. 90 seconds under concentrated fire from 12 remaining Crethon warships. "We can do this," Jake said through the link, his certainty flowing to everyone. Together, they moved the sanctuary into position, drawing the Crethon fleet together as they pursued. The enemy commanders saw an opportunity, a chance to surround and destroy their troublesome prey. They took the bait. The shields dropped. Crethon weapons fire tore into the sanctuary's hull. Explosions rocked the ship. More people died, their final thoughts echoing through the link before fading into silence. Jake felt his own body taking damage, felt the pain of wounds that weren't physically his but belonged to the ship that was part of him. 60 seconds. Hold together. Don't break. The Crethon pressed their advantage, moving closer for the kill. They didn't notice the massive energy buildup in the sanctuary's core, or if they noticed, they didn't understand what it meant until it was too late. 30 seconds. The ship was dying around them. Jake could feel its systems failing, feel the cold of vacuum rushing into breached compartments. But the weapon was almost ready. 10 seconds. 5. "Now," Jake commanded, and the sanctuary released hell. The gravitational pulse erupted outward in a sphere of warped space-time. Crethon ships that had been converging for the kill suddenly found themselves pulled together by irresistible force. Their shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and kinetic impacts, were useless against the fundamental distortion of gravity itself. The ships collided and crumpled, their hulls crushing together like paper in a giant's fist. Reactors breached and exploded. In the span of 5 seconds, 8 Crethon warships were reduced to twisted debris. The 4 remaining ships immediately began retreating, their confidence shattered. They had come expecting easy prey and instead found a foe that fought with terrifying effectiveness. As they fled toward the edge of the solar system, preparing to jump to faster-than-light speeds, they broadcast a final message. "The hegemony will return. You have made an enemy that we'll never forget." Then they were gone, leaving behind wreckage and the battered but victorious sanctuary. The integration began dissolving as the immediate crisis passed. Jake felt the other minds pulling away, becoming separate again. It was like losing parts of himself, a profound sense of loss that everyone felt simultaneously. They would remain connected, the custodian explained, but not at the intensity required for combat. The damage assessment took days. 47 people had died in the battle, their names and faces burned into the memory of everyone who had shared the neural link. Entire sections of the sanctuary needed to be rebuilt, but they had survived, and more importantly, they had won. Earth's governments were in chaos. Some wanted to surrender the sanctuary to prevent future Crethon attacks. Others called for building more ships, for preparing for war. Admiral Peterson pushed for militarizing the Velari technology, creating a fleet that could defend humanity. But it was Lisa who offered the perspective that eventually shaped humanity's response. She gave a speech that was broadcast across the solar system, and Jake felt the truth of her words through their still active connection. "The Velari spent thousands of years exploring the galaxy," she said. "They encountered dozens of species and they chose peace and observation. They believed in the value of life, all life. When they were threatened, they ran rather than become conquerors. And in the end, they died out, but they left us a gift. Not just their technology, but their values. Their hope that someone else might do better. We've proven we can fight. We've shown that humans are survivors, that we can face the impossible and prevail. But we also have a choice about what we do next. We can become warriors, spending our resources preparing for the next battle. Or we can become explorers, using Velari technology to spread life and knowledge across the galaxy. We can honor the sanctuary's builders by being what they hoped we would be." The debate lasted months, but eventually humanity chose exploration. The coalition established the sanctuary as an independent entity, a mobile home for volunteers who would venture into deep space. Jake remained as commander, leading a crew that grew to over 10,000 people. Carlos designed new ships based on Velari technology, vessels that could travel between stars and establish colonies on distant worlds. Helen developed medical treatments that extended human lifespans and health. Lisa led research teams that unlocked more of the Velari database, learning about species that had existed millions of years ago. 5 years after the battle, The sanctuary prepared for its first mission to another star system. Jake stood in the observation chamber with Lisa, watching Earth grow smaller in the distance. The planet that had been humanity's home for its entire existence was just one point of light among many now. "Do you think we'll encounter the Crethon again?" Lisa asked. "Probably," Jake admitted. "They said they wouldn't forget." "Are you afraid?" Jake considered the question. Through the neural link that still connected him to the ship and crew, he could feel the thousands of people aboard. Their hopes and dreams, their families and friendships, their determination to explore and learn. They had become something new, a fusion of human ambition and Velari wisdom. "No," he said finally. "The Crethon saw us as primitives, easy prey. But we're not the same species that huddled in caves 30,000 years ago. We've adapted, evolved, and survived everything this galaxy has thrown at us. The Velari gave us their ship, but we made it into something they never imagined. A home, a symbol, proof that even when civilizations fall, the dream of exploration and discovery can endure." The sanctuary accelerated, its Velari engines pushing it past the speed of light. Behind them, Earth and humanity's solar colonies continued growing and thriving. Ahead lay the unknown, countless worlds waiting to be discovered. The aliens had returned after 30,000 years, expecting to reclaim what was theirs. Instead, they found their lost ship had become something greater. It had found a new purpose, a new crew, and a new destiny. The Velari had built a sanctuary to preserve their dying civilization. Humanity had transformed it into a vessel of hope, carrying life and knowledge to the stars. And somewhere, Jake liked to imagine, the ancient Velari were watching and approving. They had not survived, but their legacy lived on, adapted and enhanced by the species they had observed from hiding so long ago. The sanctuary was no longer just Velari or just human. It was both, and in being both, it was something entirely new. As the stars streamed past the observation windows, Jake felt the crew's thoughts through the link. Excitement for what they would find. Curiosity about what other species might exist in the vast galaxy. Determination to honor both their human heritage and the Velari legacy they carried. The universe was big and it was dangerous, but humanity had proven it could survive. More than survive, they could thrive. And with the sanctuary as their home among the stars, they would explore farther than any human had dreamed possible. The journey was just beginning.